Time, equal parts problem and opportunity. We tend to think of time as a constant, but that's not necessarily always the case. Different people can perceive time differently at different rates, and their perception can change depending on the circumstance. Like the old saying, time flies when you're having fun, and of course we all know when you're bored, time drags on, etc. And even when not dealing with quantum translocation, things, especially in sci-fis and superhero movies, can get way more complicated, and in some cases, it can get real interesting real fast. Making something double or triple as fast or slow in the short term is manageable, but as the duration increases, so too do the problems associated with the different perception of the passage of time. But increasing the rate of the task reduces the duration that difference is manageable. Consider, even if you are of the same intelligence, if you can think twice as fast as your opponent, you are effectively twice as smart, and you will always be ahead of anyone else who is perceiving time at half the rate you are. Assuming that you live the same duration, regardless of the perception of the passage of time, you have effectively lived twice as long, and that is just doubling the rate of perception. And then of course you have the different lifespans and or the rates of perception. Even if you are not actually traveling through time, things can get weird real fast. With that in mind, I am DL Morris, and this is why being super quick could super suck. But before we begin, you can subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post more great content. One of the problems present in all superhero storylines, though to my knowledge never really addressed, is the reference frame. Lag has caused many a controller, mouse, and keyboard to be decimated due to the emotional outburst whenever that lag shows its ugly head. And yet, characters like Quicksilver or even the Flash would by very necessity deal with a certain rate of lag constantly. And they never get into any kind of tiff because people are just too slow. And that is a superpower in and of itself. These speedsters can canonically go as fast as light, which would mean that the rest of the world would be going geologically slow, or slower by comparison. How could they even keep up the concentration for what would have to seem like eons to them? Even if the Speed Force can magically over or underclock their brain's perception as needed when their rate of perception is required to change, during these times of speed, they could not communicate on a scale the rest of us could understand during that time. It would simply be too fast for us to comprehend, and we would be going far too slow for them to even recognize that we are moving. Example, if I were to just talk 4 or 5 times faster, you would barely be able to distinguish words at all. Same with me talking a quarter slower. If you can even understand, it would be rather annoying. If each participant is on the opposite end of this rate of perception difference, that is a 16x difference. That adds up real quick. If the frames of reference are substantially different, communication between them would be difficult, if even possible at all. In the time it takes for a person with a lower rate of perception to ask a question, or especially answer one, of or from the one with a faster rate of perception, they would be able to think of the answer far faster than the person asking the question could even finish. And that's of course assuming they are even interested in communicating with a person that is perceiving time at such a substantial rate below them. Think of the Galapagos turtle carrying on a conversation with a fruit fly. The turtle has hundreds of years to live and work and move and play and have fun, and the fly on the other hand has a single day. One cannot understand the motivations of the other, let alone care. The reference frames do not mesh. One is at the most an annoyance or a curiosity to another. Another problem with reference frames deals with astronomy and the Fermi paradox, and how we understand the universe. I am not saying that what we know is wrong, it's just potentially not the whole truth. Galactic and or transstellar civilization would have to fall into one of two categories. One, they would live exceptionally long lives and, as such, potentially perceive time on a slower rate in order to not get bored out of their skull. Or they would have to have faster than light capability. Both present different problems, and one weird one that deals specifically with our search for ET. With long-lived races, even should they perceive the passage of time like us, it's like the turtle and the fly again. I happen to think that they would perceive time slower to deal with the problems presented by 1,000-year minimum voyages. But that might not necessarily be the case. Even then, communication would still be a problem. While they could colonize in singular lifetimes, the communication would be that slow as well, meaning they would effectively never get out of the Pony Express days of communication, even when that communication is at the speed of light. In any event, they would have to have patience on a geologic scale compared to our own, and their activities may be too slow for us to realize is not a natural phenomenon. As an aside, this brings to mind two of the stellar civilizations in Mass Effect, the Asari and the Solarians. One lives for thousands of years, the other a few decades, yet both sit on the Galactic Council? I don't think so. Their reference frames and values would be so vastly different, I don't think that they could coexist, except as dogs coexist with us. They are useful for some purposes. Sometimes they are included in and are grouped as family units, but they are never truly integrated. The Solarians would have to pack so much living into a short time that they would be far too rash for the Asari to even consider civilized. Even if we assume that they did think in the same temporal reference, which I doubt, as 1,000-year lifespans may require a slower rate of perception. Digression over, the other side of the potential colonizing capabilities, the ones with faster than light travel and with it faster than light comm, assuming that these things are possible. After all, our science has little allowance for it, and so we may not even be able to detect such comms, let alone determine if it's natural or not. But whether long-lived or FTL capable, we do not actually see galactic now. We see galactic then. Any activity that happens now, due to distance, would not be seen for 1,000 or even millions of years. Distance also obscures details, which means that even should we be able to see or detect something, we may not be able to directly attribute it to any kind of technology. Again, without technology capable of FTL, we may not be able to determine what kind of signals they could emit or even detect it. In either case, even should a detectable event occur, we may not even be able to detect it from where we are, let alone determine if it was artificial, which is why I personally think SETI is a waste of time. Due to the sheer distance involved, we will never be able to know what is happening now, unless we develop faster than light travel and are able to go and directly see it, which brings us to the opportunities of this time lag. Like lightning, you only hear thunder after it strikes. That means if you can travel faster than light, you can know, for example, when black hole mergers are going to happen. You could go a certain distance away to watch it happen, and then later on feel the effects, perhaps multiple times and from multiple angles. Granted, as distance increases, the ability to distinguish subtle variations in the information would be harder to detect. But with supercomputers capable of faster than light calculations, the problems could be mitigated, and that is just natural galactic phenomenon. The civilizations and wars that happened in the past but were never known about before could be found out about and studied in some level of detail, depending on what signals they may or may not have inadvertently sent out. In fact, this type of temporal regression observatory could open up entirely new fields of research. We could learn about new dead civilizations from the dead civilizations themselves, or study wars in real time while knowing what happened. This would allow us to consider new tactics. As you can see, there are problems with rates of perception. Even without actual temporal translocation, time frames of reference can pose problems, but they can also provide opportunities. We really hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, you can subscribe and comment and look through our archives. Have a great day.